The comments heard on The View From A Pew are those of Mac McKoy and are not necessarily the opinions of his guests, his producer Garth, any one particular denomination or religion, the church lady, Mr. Lemke, Pastor Craig, or anyone else of sound mind and body. Now, here is today's The View From A Pew, heard all around the world on YouTube. Just search for The View From A Pew.
Good afternoon. It is the 10th day of July in the Lord's year 2023. I'm Mac McKoy, and thanks for taking your time out today to listen to The View From A Pew. You can reach me at my email, which is Mac, M-A-C, like macaroni, at theviewfromapew.com, and we'd love to hear from you if you've got some things you'd like to talk about. And what I really want to hear from you is if we don't do it right. You know, I used to be in the restaurant business, and people would say, "Oh, I love your cheeseburgers." And I'd say, "Thank you. Make sure you tell me when you don't," because that's what's important. My co-host, Delmar Austin, is in the building today, and we had such a wonderful response from you on the program that we did 4th of July week on God and Country. Delmar dived back in because you're a history buff.
Well, I like talking about history, yes.
Yeah, so he dived back in, and we're going to spend another week with you on God and Country, if you don't mind, and we appreciate you taking the time to listen and to give us feedback. So how the heck are you?
I am good. I had a good 4th of July weekend. I got to see family, got to eat some good food, got to watch some fireworks, so...
Did you get to light any fireworks? Let me see your hands.
No, I have
you
all
got
10 fingers.
All right, there you go. All right. Yeah, obviously you always hear the bad stories, after 4th of July. But I don't think there was a bunch in Omaha. I think maybe a garage burned down or something like that.
Yeah, I think I heard that.
All right, so last week we talked about God and Country, which is a very popular topic. We got a lot of good feedback on it, and we're going to do that again this week. So give me kind of the overview, if you will, just like a couple minutes of what we talked about last week and now what we're going to talk about this week and how they tie together.
Well, we started out last week, and we talked a little bit about my experience. I told you I'm a religious guy, but I'm also a very patriotic person, and I believe that I'm that way for several different reasons. I believe in the American dream. The American dream is something that I believe is bigger than what we normally think of in those terms, but I really believe in that and believe that's what drew people to this country.
All right, so here's a question for you, and I should have asked you this last week, but I didn't. When you and I were growing up, the American dream was owning a house.
Yes.
Owning a house. Back then, it was a one-stall garage. If you really were spiffy,
yes,
you'd get a one-stall garage. What do you think the American dream is here now, 60 years later?
Well, I think it's pretty much that. It's owning a house. It's maybe running your business. It's becoming financially successful in this country. And there's nothing wrong with that. Everybody has some dreams about being economically independent and being able to have the money that they need in life. And I know that's the way that it's usually identified, the American dream. I think the American dream was something very different when it got started. And it still ought to be that. And we talk about it in terms of, certain things we believe this country is about. That's, to me, what the American dream is. The American dream says, hey, there are some principles that were core beliefs that started out this country. And that's what it should be about. That's why we're so thankful to live in this country. Not just that I can have a good living, but that I can live according to these principles. And I believe two of those principles, two of those values are very important: freedom and equality.
Okay. That would certainly be something we were founded on.
Well, and I want to read it.
If you want to talk politics, I'll tell you why I'm not sure it's there anymore, but that's another day, another story.
Well, we'll touch on some politics as we go, but here is July 4, 1776. Yeah. Here's a statement that everybody signed, Jefferson wrote it. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that's equality, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's about freedom. Okay? We believe those. That's the American dream. Back at that time, there weren't all sorts of countries around the world that lived according to those values.
Oh, very few, in fact.
Right. And so they were establishing something new. They were establishing something that we could live in a new way that hadn't really been tried and worked out in the past. So that is a statement of the American dream. And it's okay to own things, and it's okay to have a stable income and all that. But the American dream is about these values, about these principles, and that's what unites us. That's what unites us to our country, because this country is a place where those values can be lived out.
Absolutely. My co-host, as always, is Delmar Austin. I'm Mac McKoy. If I haven't told you lately, thanks for listening. Love this job. Couldn't do it without you. We are live on YouTube. We are also live on several Facebook pages. And you can always get us at youtube.com and then search for The View From A Pew. So we're talking about, it's our second week on God and country. And you've got listed here, because we've got some notes, the land of the free.
We live in the land of the free. We live in this kind of country because it was one of the highest values that we had when European settlers came over to America. And I know there was history here before, but there was a reason this country was established the way that it was, and freedom was one of those high values. Now, we've read that in the Declaration of Independence, right?
Right. Yeah, you bet.
Okay. Where did Jefferson come up with those ideas? I mean, he lived in a world that was full of authoritarianism, that you had to do what the king said, and you didn't get to vote on how things are run. How did Jefferson and the other founding fathers come up with these ideas? They were biblical ideas.
Yeah, there you go. Well, they certainly didn't talk to African Americans or their wives, because they were kind of let out of the freedom in the beginning. But luckily now we have that for everybody.
Yeah. Well, I'm just going to read real briefly in regards to freedom. What does the Bible have to say? John chapter 8, Jesus is talking, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Jesus comes to this world to reveal truth. And the outcome of revealing that truth is that we will be free. He wants our freedom. He desires our freedom. God made us as free moral agents, and he wants us to experience freedom. It's never God's intention that mankind should subjugate each other and tell each other what to do. He made us to have freedom. That's a biblical concept. And people, even that lived in authoritarian countries where the king had the final say in everything, they recognized something's wrong. This was not the way that we were created.
Now, there are countries now that have kings, but they're not necessarily the king. Now, of course, in England, we have the king, which is now Charles. But a lot of other countries, they have many kings. Is that just kind of like the way they would call a senator or a congressman or something like that?
To tell you the truth, I don't know exactly, how they work it in many different countries. In England, the king is considered the head of state, but he has very little legislative powers at all. He is the spokesperson for the country.
Yeah, he's really the PR guy.
Right.
Yeah, because they have who's the head of their country? They have
Prime Minister.
Prime Minister. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. This is The View From A Pew. I'm Mac McKoy. My co-host is Delmar Austin. Austin, that's with an A. And we're talking about God and country. And we just read a little bit from John 8:32. and you shall know the truth, and it shall set you free. There's also some real wonderful stuff in the beginning of Genesis.
Yeah, and that has to do with the other value we talked about, equality. What does God say when he creates man? The very first. What does Genesis tell us? So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. God created humanity in his image. That says that everyone who is born into this world, every human being, is created in the image of God. Every person that you come across in life, every person that you meet was created in God's image. No matter what condition, no matter what status, we are so good as human beings to create all sorts of levels, all sorts of positions of status.
Yeah.
And, well, I'm better than you because I got this degree, or I'm better than you because I got a higher job.
Yeah.
Or, we look at this all the time. And that's not the way God created it. Every person is created in his image. Every person has rights. Every person ought to have freedom, and we ought to view mankind in this way.
You know, it's interesting. We're in a Bible study together, and I finally learned, just shows you how long it takes for some of us, that image is not necessarily a visual. And I always thought it was. But God's own image would also be grace and love and forgiveness and all those other things, which is a part of his character.
His character, that's right. And his character is placed within mankind too. I believe that man was born as a sinless person, but he had the freedom to choose, because God doesn't force people.
Now, we also know that there's an ABC, the most important, the second most important, and the third most important. And what are those?
Well, as I think about it in my relationship with this country, what conclusions would you arrive at? What kind of conclusions? As a Christian, my relationship with my country starts out with A, God always comes first.
You bet.
B, the United States has played a special role in history. When I look at the United States, I don't just see the country I live in and everybody's patriotic to their own country. No, there's more to it than that. It has a special place in history, and we have to admit America's had its blind spots.
Yeah, we've not always been perfect. All right, well, tomorrow we've got the Roman Road with Theo, and then we'll be back on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday as we continue to talk about God and country. And one of the questions I'm going to ask you when we come back is the United States still a Christian country today? And we'll talk about that when we come back. We're live on YouTube at youtube.com. Search for The View From A Pew. I'm Mac McKoy, and if I haven't told you lately, thanks for listening. Love this job. Couldn't do it without you. Remember, you can always get a hold of me at Mac, M-A-C like macaroni, at The View From A Pew. We'd like to thank the good folks over at DivineTruthChristian.com, and you can order online or in person at 84th and Harrison. And thanks to them for sponsoring The View From A Pew.
Divine Truth Christian Store, where you'll find more.
The comments heard on The View From A Pew are those of Mac McKoy and are not necessarily the opinions of his guests, his producer Garth, any one particular denomination or religion, the church lady, Mr. Lemke, Pastor Craig, or anyone else of sound mind and body. Now, here is today's The View From A Pew, heard all around the world on YouTube. Just search for The View From A Pew.
Good afternoon. It's the 12th day of July in the Lord's year 2023. I'm Mac McKoy, and welcome to today's edition of The View From A Pew. And my co-host is here, Delmar Austin. I got to tell you something. A friend of mine was watching the show from a week ago, and her exact comment was, well, he doesn't look as old as he sounds. You, not me, but you. And so I guess that's a compliment. I don't know, but
I don't know about that, but
yeah. Well, she really enjoys the show, though.
Well, good.
She's
I'm
out of
thankful.
state. So, all right, it is week 2 of God and Country, and I'm going to start out with a question for you.
Okay.
Is the United States still a Christian country today?
Well, that's interesting, and people have different responses to it. If you ask most people in this country, they would say, yes, we are Christians. So the biggest majority would be Christian. But to be a Christian really is more than just acknowledge that is my heritage, that,
Right.
that
Yeah,
I
Mom
grew
and Dad
up
took
as-
me to church and all
That's
that
right.
kind of stuff, yeah.
If you're really thinking in terms of active Christians, people who not only go to church, but who pray, who read the Bible, who believe in a relationship with God, it's probably more like about 1 out of 5, at least according to those that have taken careful statistics about it. But, I think I would say it's a post-Christian world that we're living in this country. And I would say that because a lot of the moorings that made us Christian are being lost sight of, and we'll talk about that.
Lost sight of, you're too nice. They're being ripped from our hands.
Well, I wouldn't put it quite that way. I think that we deserve what we get in life, and we let go of the things that are most important sometime. And we want just a little Christianity sometimes. We want to be recognized that we're a Christian, but we really don't want to have to live like a Christian. And that's what leads to kind of a post-Christian kind of mentality.
Yeah, I was standing in a worship center once that had 2,800 people in it at one time. And I was standing next to a pastor, and I said, so, Pastor, what do you think the percentage here that are truly born-again, active, read my Bible Christians? And I thought he'd say, well, maybe only 80 or 90%. He said 10. Maybe 10%. The rest of them were there for checking off the box, taking the kids to Sunday school. And he said most of them, when they hit the car on their way down the street, they already forgot what Jesus should mean to them.
Yeah, and that's sad. And we don't want to be judgmental towards everybody, but just what we see in this world, how we see people living, is a pretty good indication.
Well, I try not to be judgmental, but Jesus does teach us that we can be fruit inspectors. And sometimes people giggle with that, and it's fine, but the Bible teaches us that if we're in a relationship with another Christian and it seems that their walk is maybe straying off or not as devout as maybe we think they should be, it's okay to very kindly,
Right.
kind of say, hey, how you doing on this thing?
Jesus was always honest with people that he was with.
I tell you the truth.
I tell you the truth. Mac, I want to go back to those 3 conclusions.
Okay.
In our last show, we talked about those conclusions about our relationship with our country, because we as followers of God, how do we relate to our country? Well, we said the first conclusion is God always comes first. And that just means that I don't make my country as important as God. It's not an equal kind of relationship. God is always first in my life, and I always follow him, and I don't worship my country. I am thankful for my country, and I feel patriotic about it, and I want to be supportive of my country, but sometimes I have to even make choices between God and country.
Oh, yeah.
That happens sometimes in just the course of normal events. I was having a discussion this weekend with a family member who will go unnamed, but we were talking.
They were wrong, right?
No, we were talking politics. Okay.
Oh,
and the
horrible thing to do.
well, and the comment was that all politicians today are corrupt. They're all, whether it's Republicans, Democrats, whoever, they're all corrupt, and we can't trust any of them. Well, you know, we live in a time where there's a lot of corrupt politicians, and I will grant that. But I don't think all
no.
politicians are corrupt.
I was just going through in my mind politicians that I know, both here in Nebraska and Iowa, that are not corrupt by any means.
Well, I think there are some, and here's how I would state it, some honest men or women of integrity who also have a spirit of charity, which I think is a real big Christian virtue, towards others and towards their work.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of people that will stand up and tell the truth, even when it goes against the side that they may be on.
Well, and so many of them are really open to talk about their faith.
Yes.
And that's a very unpopular thing to do if you want to be reelected, but yet they stand firm and they do that.
Well, sometimes people jump on the side of Christians just because it's helpful to them politically if they have a Christian base. So I don't want an ingenuous kind of person just claiming religious principles and not really living by them. But in my experience, I've seen people that I believe are true Christians, and they're trying to make the right choices. They're trying to do the right thing. So I believe that's an example of somebody who's putting God first, not country first. They love the country. They want to serve the country. They're all about that, but they want to put God first in everything.
Yeah.
And that's the way it ought to be in our lives, all of our lives.
Absolutely. This is The View From A Pew at theviewfromapew.com. We appreciate you listening this afternoon. I'm Mac McKoy, and my co-host is Delmar Austin, and we're talking about God and country.
And the next conclusion that has to do with our relationship with our country is the recognition as a Christian that God has used our country in the past.
Yeah.
God had a special role for our country. Now, I believe that in the same way I have faith in God, okay? I can't prove that God exists, but I have faith in God that he is really out there. I believe that God had a special role for this country, even though I can't prove it. I can't cite documentation to convince you that that's the case. But as I look through history and I see what happens, I believe that God had a purpose. Yes, European Americans came over here, and yes, they displaced some people that already lived here. But I believe that God had a purpose in that to create a place where there was religious freedom. That was one of the big core values. And it's part of our Constitution, religious freedom.
Yeah, but we get it wrong a lot.
Well, we do get it wrong many times.
It was the freedom to choose your religion and not to necessarily have to follow a state religion.
Well, sometimes we got it wrong from the very first, too.
Yeah,
and there was that kind of force. But I really believe, and I went, going back last week, I talked about some of my ancestors were French Huguenots. They were French Protestants, and they were being persecuted in their country, and they wanted religious freedom to practice according to their beliefs. So they came over to America. And as they got established, they found that freedom. But there were lots of individual Christians from different kind of denominational backgrounds that came because they wanted religious freedom. Having religious freedom in this country has freed many people up to do many good things to help spread God's word, to help carry out the gospel commission. So I believe that God had a purpose and intention for this country to be a place where religious freedom could exist, because it didn't exist in most places around the world at that time.
Well, and I just pray that we never get to the point as Americans where we have to go find the next place.
Yes.
That we can have religious freedom because we've lost so much of it here.
Yeah, and unfortunately we see some signs, not too good signs.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Do I have time to mention that last item there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, the other conclusion, America has had some major blind spots.
Yep.
and this is true, the way we treated indigenous people when we came, I think it could have been handled better.
Absolutely.
We could have done a better job of working out arrangements and not just, we could have shared the land. Many of the American Indians were open to some kind of agreement to share things, and we didn't want to share. We wanted everything.
I know.
Unfortunately.
Another thing about Americans and our character, we're selfish.
Well, that's true, I'm afraid, and it caused all these problems. The whole blind spot that we had towards African Americans serving as slaves in this country.
Yep.
Thomas Jefferson writes the Declaration of Independence about equality. All men are created equal. Yet had slaves, never let those slaves go.
Yep.
Even when he died, he still owned slaves, and he passed them on to his children and family.
Wow.
You know, that's a really statement about those blind spots that we had.
Well, and you talked about in the beginning that we are secured by the Constitution to have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I think they were only thinking of men at that time, because women didn't have that, and as you said, the American Indian, African Americans, etc. So you're exactly right, Delmar.
I think it just went right over them. You know, they were thinking of men. They were probably thinking of white landowners, and not everybody, because they really didn't want everybody's input.
Right. All right, we're going to come back again tomorrow, and we will be here right at 4 o'clock Central Daylight Time if you're listening live on the radio. You can always watch us on YouTube. Go to youtube.com and then search for The View From A Pew. Now, one more point I want to talk about, because we've got about a minute left, and that is faith in America.
Well, our faith as believers in Jesus Christ, as followers of Him, is, I believe, what makes America strong. America is strong when we are truly living the Christian life, not just when we proclaim that I'm a Christian, and or that we try to run the country in a just a Christian dominated sort of way. What really makes the country strong has to do with the kind of lives that we're living.
And we'll talk about that and more tomorrow. My question for you when we come back is what role has organized Christianity played in creating the blind spots? I'm McKoy. If I haven't told you lately, thanks for listening. Love this job. Couldn't do it without you. Co-host Delmar Austin. And our sponsor, of course, Divine Truth Christian.com, and they're located at 84th and Harrison in Omaha. But if you're listening to this in another community, another state, another country, go to DivineTruthChristian.com and you can order anything that they've got there just for you.
Divine Truth Christian Store, where you'll find more.
The comments heard on The View From A Pew are those of McKoy and are not necessarily the opinions of his guests, his producer Garth, any one particular denomination or religion, the church lady, Mr. Lemke, Pastor Craig, or anyone else of sound mind and body. Now, here is today's The View From A Pew, heard all around the world on YouTube. Just search for The View From A Pew.
Thank you, Emily. We appreciate you being here. We thank you for being here. You know, we always talk about a lot of the people that help us around here, but I don't mention Garth enough. You know, Garth is a great producer, and he's got us now on 16 podcast sites. And you can go to my Facebook page, and eventually it'll be on the website. But almost anywhere, you just go to Google and search for The View From A Pew, and you'll be able to find our free, no charge, podcasts. And just remember to subscribe. That would be what I'd really appreciate if you would just subscribe to not only the platform, but also our individual show. It is the 13th day of July in the Lord's year 2023, and we're talking about God and country. And my question for you as we came back, you keep talking about blind spots, and that's where, well, you defined it. How would you define a blind spot?
Well, we talked about something like slavery. We talked about something like the way indigenous people were affected. We had the right principles. There's no question about it. We had the ideas of equality and freedom. This is what we stand for. And yet, it didn't seem to apply to African Americans. It didn't apply to women. It applied, we didn't apply it equally the way that the Bible teaches it.
Well, and I think you were the one that taught me this. Jesus came and made everybody equal. Everybody is equal in Jesus' eyes.
Well, and we were from the very beginning, too. We were created equal because, it says male and female, he created them.
So what role do you think our denomination, Christianity, well, I guess that's a religion, our religion, Christianity, has played in creating some of those blind spots?
Christianity is strong when it teaches God's word. When Christianity doesn't teach God's word, or when they fudge a little, when they don't tell the truth about what God's word says.
Or they follow the society and the trends rather than what the Bible says.
I was a preacher for many years.
Yes, you were.
And
a good one, by the way.
And many people will say, sometimes the preacher doesn't preach it the way it should be done. Why? Because he doesn't want to offend people.
Right.
He doesn't want to say the truth too straight. Well, when Christianity is telling the straight truths of God, it's not always popular. And so sometimes Christianity starts fudging on certain issues. And when they do that, it gets us farther and farther away from God. And at the time of slavery, at the time of the Civil War, before the Civil War, there are preachers who are preaching from the Bible, and they're saying God ordained slavery. He put it in place, and so why are we trying to fight it? And especially all the Southern preachers are keeping everybody happy down in the South because they're giving this message. It's not the truth of the Bible.
Well, and just a point of history, slavery in many circles meant paid or compensated employee. They weren't all just given nothing. All of them usually had a place to live for they and their family, and a lot of them were compensated. So when you read in the Bible about slavery, remember that's really not the correct word. It would be employment with another.
At the same time, many people who served in those roles had very little freedom. They were pretty much under the control of the person who they worked for.
Yeah.
And that was something that they wanted to break free from, and that's why America got started.
All right, so it is today's 13th, Thursday, and we are live here on your local radio station, as well as always on the View From A Pew at youtube.com. Just search for the View From A Pew.
I want to talk a little bit today about the loss of a moral compass. We said Christianity is kind of, in this country, we're kind of post-Christian. Well, without, I don't want to sound like I'm negative on the country, but I do think we need to point out some signs that maybe we're getting farther and farther away from the truth of God. Let me play a little game with you, Mac, okay?
Uh-oh.
Okay, let's try this.
I'm no good at games.
Well, you tell me what company is associated with this advertising tagline, okay?
Okay.
Just do it.
Nike.
Right. America runs...
And by the way, we did not talk about this before.
We didn't try it first.
So I'll probably get some of these wrong, but I do know that's Nike.
America runs on...
I don't know. I'm sorry.
Well, good for you. Duncan. Dunkin'.
Oh, yeah, Dunkin' Donuts.
Donuts,
I
yeah.
wouldn't know that because I don't eat donuts.
Well, good for you. You're taking care of yourself. Have it your way.
McDonald's.
Burger King.
Or
but
Burger
that's
King.
Close. Burger
Yeah.
King. Bet you can't eat just one.
Lay's potato chips.
Yes.
All right.
And the quicker picker-upper.
Bounty.
Bounty tells.
Yeah.
You're right.
Wow.
And you know, and we don't try to memorize this stuff. What happens? It gets stuck in our minds, right?
Yep.
They're doing a good job of advertising because they got it stuck in our minds. Okay, my first point that I want to make about this is we are not very good anymore teaching the Bible.
Right.
We are not very good in this country with Bible knowledge. Okay, if people don't have much Bible knowledge and we're not doing a very good job of teaching the Bible, how do you expect us to live according to the principles of the Bible?
Oh, that's exactly right. I will always tell you the worst thing we did as a society was take God out of public schools, or as I like to call them, government schools.
Yeah, and I think Christian worship is losing attraction for a lot of people.
Yep.
And I think many times it's kind of geared towards entertainment.
Well,
and not so much Christian teaching.
Yeah, well, and those are the churches that are growing, the ones that are putting on quite the show.
And I'm not trying to criticize anybody, and I know things change over time, but we have to be real focused on the Bible and Bible teachings to stay true to Christianity, what really following Jesus means. And okay, if that happens, if we're getting farther away, if we have people who understand less about the Bible, then it's just normally going to happen that our lives and our lifestyle is going to go in a different way other than the moral kind of ethics that we had from the very start.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Now, I'll give you one of my, I don't know if it's a blind spot, but I don't care about the language that's used in a movie or a TV show. I can look past that.
Right.
I'm not offended when they take the Lord's name in vain. I wish I could tell the actor or actress, God heard you. Jesus knows you just said that. Or my favorite thing is when somebody uses Jesus' name in vain, I'll say, present. Maybe that they know he's here.
I think it's become a blind spot in our society today that people don't think about it anymore. Yeah. That they say those words and, they've just heard those words all their lives and it's like no big thing. But particularly in the area of profanity, of using God's name, that is something that the Bible speaks very clearly about, and it has to do with respect. It has to do with fearing God in the sense that we respect what he is all about.
And I don't know if you and I have ever talked about this, but my 2 cents is all those words that are 4-letter words or whatever, that's not the swearing the Bible speaks of. It's taking the Lord's name in vain, saying you're going to do something in God's name and then don't doing it.
Well, there is profanity, and I think that's real clear. There is a lot of stuff that's just called as part of vulgarity. And we don't need all those kind of words in a society.
No, we don't.
Because there are words already that are there, but we do it because of the kind of reaction that it arouses in other people and in ourselves sometimes.
Yeah. Every once in a while, I'll use the term feces when somebody else will use a 4-letter word.
That's right.
I don't know why we're not offended by feces, but we are the other one. But we choose to be offended about things. But taking the Lord's name in vain, like I said.
That's real clear.
Yeah, I don't get offended, but I worry about the people saying it.
Yeah.
My ears are fine.
Well, that's on your list. I want to talk a little bit on my list, what I would say are some signs that America has to some degree lost their moral compass.
All right, I'm ready.
Okay, first one I'm going to start with, sexual permissiveness. Now, the reason I use that word permissiveness is because I'm not talking necessarily about immorality here, although that leads to it. Sexual permissiveness has to do with more of a casual approach to sexuality that leads towards immorality.
And Paul talks about that in 1 Corinthians. I think it's chapter 6 somewhere in there.
Yeah. And yeah, I can quote that here to you.
Well, of course you can.
Flees sexual immorality. Every sin that a man does is outside his body, but he who commits sexual immorality sins against his own body. What he's saying there is that this sin has a significant impact upon you in your life because it has to do with how you treat your body. And so he's saying this is serious, that it ought to be taken in a serious way, not just a casual way. My wife and I went to visit our son recently down in Florida.
Yep.
And we decided one day we're going to go out to the beach and enjoy some time. We just like walking up and down by the ocean. So we go to the beach. We're down there. Our son is a runner, likes to run, wanted to get in a few extra miles that day. So he went up the beach while my wife and I were just suntanning ourselves, and we didn't realize we were that close to a nude beach. And so
you found out the hard way, huh?
He goes running up there and suddenly realizes nobody has clothes on. So he turns around and comes back, and it was a little joke we had. But and I'm not saying that people are immoral for being part of a nude beach, but there is a casual way of acting in regards to sexuality that has a tendency to lead towards immorality.
Oh, absolutely.
And, the issues, two of the biggest issues that Christians are talking about a lot today are abortion and the LGBTQ plus whatever situation in our country. These are all connected with sexual permissiveness.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so when we come back on Friday, we're going to talk about three of the other things that are involved in, I guess.
Well, these are on my list. Again,
Yeah.
this would be my list of saying, okay, this is a picture that shows us that we've lost our moral compass and we're not following biblical ethics.
This is The View From A Pew, and you can listen to it every day here on your local radio station and get it on YouTube at theviewfromapew.com and search youtube.com and then The View From A Pew. Thanks to the folks over at Divine Truth Christian Store for sponsoring us. We appreciate you listening, and thanks.
Where you'll find more.
The comments heard on The View From A Pew are those of McKoy and are not necessarily the opinions of his guests, his producer Garth, any one particular denomination or religion, the church lady, Mr. Lemke, Pastor Craig, or anyone else of sound mind and body. Now here is today's The View From A Pew, heard all around the world on YouTube. Just search for The View From A Pew.
Good afternoon. It is Friday, finally at the end of the week, the 14th day of July in the Lord's year 2023. I'm McKoy along with my co-host Delmar Austin, and this program is called The View From A Pew, and I appreciate you listening. I love this job, and I couldn't do it without you. We are in the middle of our second week, or actually coming to the end in our second week, about talking about God and country. And we're kind of in a tough place right now, so bear with us. We don't mean to offend anybody, but there are all kinds of things going on in the world right now which, well, they're opposite from what the Bible teaches.
And I want to try to reassure people today, too. I love my country. I feel I'm very patriotic. I love America. I love the principles that we stand for in this world. And so I am not... I'm not just standing back and throwing things at the country. I'm concerned about some directions that I see, and I think it's fair to say that in some ways we've lost our moral compass, that we're not as strongly living by biblical ethics as we once did. And I had a list of different things, of ways that I see are signs of that reality.
Yeah, and we talked about sexual permissiveness yesterday, but there's three more that we have got to cover.
Well, I will suggest our problems in this country with drug and alcohol abuse. We continue to be one of the places in this world with high problems that deal with drugs and alcohol.
Yep.
And sad stories, at least I hear, as a pastor, and my wife was a social worker, so many sad stories that we've heard over the years of people whose lives were ruined by these substances.
Well, and we're all created with this space within our flesh and mind and soul where God is supposed to live. But when we don't let him live there, it's drugs, alcohol, gambling, food, all kinds of things that destroy the temple, our bodies.
And I realize, of course, these are addictions that people get into, and they lose control over their own choices.
Oh, yeah.
And recognize that sadness. When I was a young pastor, I used to help out with something called 5-day plans to stop smoking.
Okay.
Because back in the 70s, when I was starting out as a pastor, there were a lot of people who were smoking that wanted to stop smoking.
Yeah.
Why is that? Because they started telling the truth on cigarette packages. They saying this can lead to lung cancer. This can lead to death. Don't use this product if you want to be healthy.
Nobody listened.
Well, some people did. Some people did not know the dangers of tobacco back at that time.
Yeah.
So a lot of people were looking for an answer to stop smoking, and it wasn't easy. And so we would run them through a program, and many of them stopped smoking. And then I used to bring them around. They'd have testimonies to give to others about how they did it, and I believe a lot of people quit. The reason that we don't do many of those programs, and there are places you can still go to, but the reason those programs are not as popular is because now people know the effects of tobacco and they still use it anyway.
Yeah.
And that is just going against common sense, and it's clearly going against biblical teachings, which are clear through the Bible that our body is a gift from God. We are made in God's image. We can't go around destroying our body. If we do things knowingly that are going to ruin our body temple, we're really going against the ways of God there.
My guest host today is Delmar Austin. I shouldn't say guest because you're here every day and we appreciate that. I'm Mac McKoy. This is The View From A Pew. We're talking about God and country and some of the things that are really messing us up. Sexual permissiveness, drugs and alcohol abuse. And where do we see all of this?
Well, we see it in high degrees in this country, which we say is a Christian nation. And it's a sign that we're getting farther and farther away from that. Have you ever had surgery and had to deal with the pain afterwards?
Yeah, but I already know what you're going to say. When I had my hip replaced last year, I didn't take any painkillers.
Well, good for you.
I just didn't want to do it.
Well, let me tell you my story. When I've had a fairly healthy life. I've been healthy through most of my life. I had some surgery back about 15 years ago. And I had to go to, actually in Chicago, I went to Northwestern Hospital, and because the surgeon was there, did the surgery. I'm in Northwestern Hospital, downtown Chicago, and I go through the night after the surgery, and I wake up, I can't sleep. I'm thinking to myself, this is the most uncomfortable bed that I've ever slept in. And then I realize it's not the bed. You just had major surgery and you're aching. Your whole body is aching. And so I'm laying there, and finally the nurse comes in, and the nurse increases the dosage of morphine.
Oh, man.
and I'm saying, oh, thank you. Thank you. Now, what I'm trying to say is I recognize there are chemicals that need to be used at times to kill pain. At times there are some other uses that they have in the body. I'm not trying to say that every chemical is wrong, but we have got in this country to the point where we think there is a pill to fix everything.
Well, and there is.
Well, they say it's going to fix
right,
it. It doesn't
right.
always fix it, but
Yeah.
yes, there's a pill for everything that's out there, and it's not healthy for us.
Now, what about the entertainment industry? Because we really see a lot of this on the TV, the movies, etc.
I think we're being entertained to death. We're entertained at every angle, and part of it, I'm guilty of. My cell phone here has got information. It's got movies, television programs. It's got everything at my hand all the time. And you know what? Even in church, I see people at times just watching their cell phone and not paying attention to what's
really?
going on.
How do you know they're not looking at their Bible?
Well, that's possible too. Please. But I don't think there's any question that there is so much that's going on. The area of sports, how big sports are. I'm not against sports. I like sports. But sports is such a big industry. There's so much money that is poured into sports today, and a lot of it is for the sake of entertainment. There's in baseball, what are there, 18 people out on the field or playing in the game, and there's how many up in the stands? 50,000 people or whatever that are watching it all. They're not getting any exercise. They're just watching what's going on. It's for entertainment purposes. Movies, TV, media, gaming, entertainment centers that are built around the world, like Disney World, which I've gone to see several times when I go visit my kids down in Orlando. I mean, why do we need so much entertainment? Because we got to have something going all the time. And so we're just drawn into all this. And even Christians are drawn into all this entertainment.
Well, and my personal feeling is, and you don't have to comment on this, but I never let my kids play video games. And I was that bad dad, But look at what that type of numbing of death is doing to us now.
I agree.
Constant shootings, kids involved. It's just so sad.
I'm not saying there's not a role for sports and movies and even some gaming, but we get absorbed by it. We get totally absorbed by it. Do you remember the Beirut bombing that took place a few years back?
Oh, yeah.
The Beirut bombing killed several hundreds of people. I don't remember the number right now, but one of the things that was put on the news was a video that was being taken at the time of the bombing, when this great explosion takes place, and it was a videographer that was doing the background for a wedding. And he was taking pictures of the bride, and the bride was showing off her wedding dress, and she was sashaying around back and forth, and he was getting great footage when all of a sudden that blast takes place. And what you see is like a huge sandstorm that comes across the screen, and everything's, you don't even see the bride or the background anymore. And then the next thing you see, the camera's going wild, and it comes back to the bride, and somebody's got hold of the bride and taking her to safety out of the way. But what had just happened was that this explosion had taken place. They were working downtown near the explosion, and suddenly in the middle of this, there's this traumatic event that takes place where hundreds of people died. That reminded me of what Jesus had to say, talking about, for in the days of Noah, it's going to be just like at the time of the coming of the Son of Man. And a couple of the things Jesus said, people will be marrying and giving in marriage. Yeah, suddenly, when everybody's doing these things, everybody's involved in the busyness of this world, suddenly Jesus returns. And suddenly, men have to answer for all the things that they've done. Pretty dramatic.
Well, I think we have a real abuse for our environment. I remember the Indian chief on the commercials when we were kids, and it was about littering, and he had a tear roll down because we were messing up his country.
That's another indication of the fact that we don't care. This is God's creation. We don't seem to care much.
No, not at all. All right. So, Delmar, do you have any idea what we're going to talk about next week, or are you on vacation?
Well, I am retired, so I do have a little more time. I travel now and then, but I will be here next week,
Okay.
and we will talk more about the Bible and Bible truth.
All right, I'm Mac McKoy. If I haven't told you lately, thanks for listening. We love our jobs. We couldn't do it without you there. You can find us at many, many places thanks to our producer, Garth. We're now on about 16 or 17 pod sites. And just search for The View From A Pew. And, excuse me, you'll be taken to some of those sites. But as always, we're on YouTube. So you got to go to youtube.com and then search for The View From A Pew. Comments, suggestions, criticism, we want to hear them all. Email me at Mac, M-A-C, like macaroni, at theviewfromapew.com, and we would appreciate your input. We also appreciate our sponsor, Divine Truth Christian Stores. If you're in Omaha, 84th and Harrison. If you're online, well, you can get them there too. Just go to divinetruthchristian.com and you can see all the items that they have in the store. Order them from anywhere in the world. And we thank you for your support of Divine Truth Christian Stores.
Where you'll find more.
And by the way, we'll be back here on Monday. And if we're not here, here's my suggestion. Find Jesus, because
Amen.
we'll be with him.
Amen.